To tell the truth, I can confess. I start my studies studying physics here in the University of São Paulo. Then I spent some time in the United States, in Stanford, and was transformed into a mathematician. But then I decided to go to another field of knowledge. I studied a lot of logic, mathematics, and then I decided to study economics. At that time, I said, oh, let's start to solve the big problems of the world. I studied philosophy later in my life. But then I was really I started studying economics. Mathematics and economics at that time started being put together. And then I was completely convinced to study international economics and international trade. So I spent some time in the United States, then in Brussels. At that time I studied a lot about integration, and it's a pity to see what's going on with Europe, right? And then I spent the 15 years of my life in Geneva with the Brazilian mission, in study and working with World Trade Organization. And then I decided, well, life was quite boring because of the fight U.S. Against the WHO, against everybody in Geneva. And in 2010, I decided to come back to Brazil, and I am head of a center of trade regulation. I put together people from international relations, economists, and people of the law school. And we are doing a lot of comparison studies on regulatory issues, right? And so more or less, when Professor Amancio invited me to talk to you, I said, well, let tell them what a little bit of the history of my life, because it's exactly what you are trying to do, right? I start with science, and then I went to the other side, the diplomatic side, right? Now, what we are going to talk is to see how science and innovation and technology, these three areas are used and being used as an instrument of diplomacy in the area of trade. So what we're going to talk is about trade and how science and innovation and technology are really important factors in this kind of discussion. If you want to be something in your life and you are following what's going on around the world, this is the area of what we call the international economic system. It doesn't matter where you work, where you study. It doesn't matter if it's chemistry, it is law, it is human rights. The methodology of your life must be changed the way that the first question is, where is the basic regulation of this area, right? So in the economic area, you can go like this. Are you looking for trade relation, about the preferential trade agreements? Go to the WTO. But you cannot do this. What is trade? You have to exchange things. You have to pay for it. So you have to know what's going on in the IMF, the International Monetary Fund. And I spend a lot of time discussing the trade, the wars of exchange rate wars. And look, what's going on now? Why we have this fight between the United States and China? One of the issues is because China has an undervaluated currency. And the United States too, and Germany too. So it's funny, how many of you are from Europe? Do you know that your marvelous euro is a fiction, a virtual fiction? Because the power, I am a very aggressive person, but I promise, I love all of you, so I'm very friendly. But it's funny do you know that the purchasing power of the German euro is completely different from your Italian euro or the Portuguese euro? The capacity to buy things in Europe. And at Germany, from the last 20 years, is practicing a devaluated currency. That's the point. So it doesn't matter. And I spend half of my life talking about tariff and all these terrible things that is to how to impose a tax on the border. And come on, if you have undervalued or overvalued currency, come on, you completely undermine all the systems. So you have to take a look if you are going to deal with trade and diplomacy and see what's going on. Now you go, if you talk about investment, you are going to talk about investment. Now the important issue now is how all the banks can only give you loans if you promise to the bank that we are going to have a sustainable investment. What is this? What's going on? So this is the end to have a sustainable, you have to take care of pollution, of anything, of emissions and all this. And behind the instruments, the objective instruments, you need to have science and a lot of technology. Now you go to the world of finance. If you ask me why the world is why so many the problems of distribution of wealth in the world, it's not about globalization of trade. It's because of the finance system. That's the why I can talk to you a lot about what's going on the area of finance. And if you want to talk about diplomacy of science, you have to ask money from somebody else. So finance is a really important issue. And here, IMF, then you have the bilateral investment treaties. There's no organization who have more than 3,000 treaties of investment. Then the area of finance, this is an area that really needs a big organization. Because what are the main actors here? The central banks, the Basel Bank in Switzerland, and then you have the famous Finance Stability Board. And come on, be ready. All the experts are foreseeing a big crash. Again, another one. And now a big depression, a big bubble. Nobody knows where this bubble came from. But you go to a lot of literature now, they are going to talk about that something is going to come. A big depression, a big trouble around. Then if you go to the organization, the Cooperation of Development Economics, what you're going to see in Paris, you are going to see a lot of the rich countries, a lot of public policies on things that must be policies of governance. Really interesting organization. And a lot of sustainability is there, a lot of digital work, if you want to discuss with this. These are the places where you need to find out the big regulations. Then you have environment. Sorry about the computer, gets the T out. You have the United Nations. And for you, for science and technology, WIPO is a really important institution because it is in Geneva and where you discuss and negotiate all the big treaties on marks, on patents, on copyrights, all the things that are related to intellectual property and where you have to know the rules, because I hope that you are going to discuss exactly these kind of things. How to trade, finance, how to use science, and how to use this technology to get some kind of good behavior, that is peace, right? A thing that is becoming quite scarce. So let's go up. Here is the house of the trade organization, the old building at the bottom, and the new building at the border of the Lac Léman, a very nice place. And what we do there, where I'm going to arrive, we are going to talk about the regulatory wars and how the big countries are using science and technology to make a kind of dominance, how to impose the power of technology and science in the area of trade. That's the funny thing about where you arrive. Always trade, how we impose environment rules, how we are going to impose human rights. all the countries, the big countries are using trade to impose compliance with the main objectives. So the objective of the WTO is liberalization of trade. It's non-discrimination of trade, right? And use this kind of taxes all around to eliminate these tariffs, what we call tariffs. And to tell the truth, this, I can say it is the old word, because tariff is not important anymore. What is important is the regulation of the different countries and how you use regulations to impose restrictions on trade. The functions of the WTO is a forum for negotiation. Well, we are stuck in the 9th round. Nobody knows what's going to happen. It's a forum for supervision of trade rules. Every country spend a lot of time under the examination exercise in Geneva. WTO has a big tribunal where you have two kinds of judgment, one for the panelists, the other one for the appellate body. And the way, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the United States, is really paralyzing the institution, is not accepting to nominate a new arbiters. And till the end of December, 2 of the last 3 ones will be finished their period in the WTO, and now nobody knows what's going to happen. And now in WTO, we have 164 members, some observers, and the main actors are much less. And so you have more or less how it works. The main issues, and when you talk about trade, you have the WTO professor. You have the WTO producing the main rules, and you have a lot of the FTA, the free trade arrangements or preferential trade arrangements. Professor Amans, I'm trying to convince everybody that you have science, you have innovation, you have technology. At the end, to enforce the rules, you have to go to trade. Professor Amans and I are we studied a lot together many years, so we discuss the same things. We do not agree, but we discuss a lot. Now, what are the big issues? Nice that you are here, because I want to show you something. What's about the... when you talk about trade, come on, it's not good against the soya beans and all the things. Not. You are talking about, yes, a lot of all the kind of goods, agricultural and industrial goods, but you have also service. Come on, if you talk about technology, where is technology now? Service, telecommunication, and all the area of finance, e-commerce, all the digital products. It's service, it is good. What is it? Nobody knows. And to tell the truth, the rules of trade, we are going to change these rules because of the digital world. And then this is the work that I want to present to you, that is about regulatory wars, is about technical barriers to trade. It's about how you build places, how the electronics function, why I can use this without being burned because of short circuit, something like that, and how you can export machinery and so on without having problem. SPS is sanitary, phytosanitary measures. If you talk about meat, if you talk about poultry, anything, soya beans, orange juice, and all this, you have to talk about how you get this, how your sanitary problems are solved. And we have for this international rules all over again. So a lot of diplomacy around this. And who are the persons behind the technical measures and the sanitary, phytosanitary measures? At the end, scientists, right? And you have to have science and innovation to do this. How do you imagine that you are going to change the gene of a seed to be resistant to any kind of pesticide and so on? a lot of science on this, right? And one of the most complex issues of our day are the famous voluntary sustainable standards. They are not mandatory, they are voluntary, and they are produced not by governments, but by NGOs, non-government organizations. So you are following what's going on in Brazil. Brazil has a huge problem of deforestation, of fire on the forest, and so on. There is no international rule to be used against Brazil. What do you think Germany and France are going to do? To impose voluntary standards that are not voluntary at all on the exports of Brazil, soya beans, orange, and so on. What they are going to say, if you want to export meat for me, you have to have a label. In this label, you have to see Brazil is a friend of the Amazon forest. That's it. And Sweden is not allowing imports from Brazil without a label that you are preserving the forest. So this is, look at how interesting. Technical measure and phytosanitary measure are produced by international organizations where you have more or less government producing the rules and the scientific basis. But you have, in this area, standards on sustainability not necessarily produced by governments, but by experts or non-experts. So you have a big barrier for trade if you are not taking care of this issue. And the other area that's important for you, intellectual property. I think that we are going to have a panel, right, with intellectual property. So what I can do is, what I can say to you is that intellectual property is what I said, copyright, that is the author, protection of intellectual rights. And then you have marks, that is like Coca-Cola or something, or University of São Paulo has a logo, is a mark. Then you have also patents, and you have geographic indication. That's a thing that it's so important for the Europeans. And you have also circuits and all the other area of intellectual property. But you have a house, a big organization that is the World International Property Right in Geneva. And the funny thing is that it's a very rich organization, is producing conventions on intellectual property rights, but is a rich organization because the WIPO receive a percentage of every copyright or mark that you are producing. But the funny thing, what we say in Geneva, that the WIPO is a very rich and poor and very important organization, but has no teeth, that is, has no tribunal, cannot settle disputes and cannot solve the big conflicts. And in the Uruguay round, many years ago, the United States and European, Switzerland and all the rich countries decided to bring the issue of intellectual property to the WTO. Exactly why? To impose rules on true trade on intellectual property. And now if you go to the US, the US preferential arrangements, agreements, what you are going to see is a protection not only of the patent, that is, you have to pay a percentage of the price of the medicine to the owner of the patent, but the United States is protecting also the data, the big data that you use before start selling the medicine. So if protected, come on, this is pure science. You will start treating a kind of new disease. You start trying to use this, and you have all the data on this. And the United States wants to protect this for 10 years. So for developing countries, after the 20 years of the patent, to start using, producing generics, you have to also take care of the data and start reproducing it to see if it works to your country after these 10 years of protection. So it's a new, different things. And what is interesting, if you compare the United States and the European Union, is the United States is completely oriented to protecting intellectual property. If you go to the European Union is much more worried about to protect human rights, sustainability, climate change, forest, and so on. If you go, so you can see, and for me, trade is the instrument the countries use to protect and to impose their own concepts around the world. You can do the two things. You protect your country, but you also use this to impose your own regulation. Then you have investment, you have digital economy, environment, labor, and labor standards, dispute settlement, anti-corruption. This is a new big issue. Currency and exchange rates, as I said. And for me, the big discussion is how to put all this together and make trade and make peace. You have to be coherent, convergent, and you have to cooperate. This is where you get into the word, right? This is the trade of goods. You are talking about $19 trillion. You have the numbers. You have for service. And the funny thing, you discuss exports and imports of goods. You discuss imports and exports of service. And what you discuss now is the famous mode 5 of service. That is, how you start making rules for service, right? You have the modes of supply of service. That is, the service can get into your computers, mode 1, the service get into, like Netflix and so on, movies, music. Then you have mode 2, that is where you consume, you have to fly to go to Paris, for instance. Then you have mode 3 of supply of service, that is when the banks arrive in Brazil to start offering service on finance. And you have mode 4, when you are the expert and you decide to travel and offer your service in another place. Now they are discussing in Geneva already mode 5, that is the service embedded in your good. Go to that automobile. What's an automobile? The automobile has a lot of parts, but has 50% of the value of the automobile is service. Our service embedded in the automobile. And so, come on, you are exporting what? Goods, components, and you are exporting service. So how you are going to deal with this? And so what the European Union proposes, not tax. When you tax an automobile, you have to tax only the part of impose tariffs on the part of components, but not in the part of service. So there's a big discussion, and come on, what is the digital world? It's a really complicated issue, right? How you are going to, and the WTO is discussing now exactly digital trade, an agreement on digital trade, right? Look, this is the WTO, a really complex institution where you discuss everything. There is no committee on science and innovation, but we are talking about science and innovation all around the committees. This I can tell you. How do you think you are going to discuss technology without doing exactly what's going on, who is producing, who is developing it? So before you start a negotiation, you have to know everything on this. When you discuss service like public works, you have to know what kind of technology do you have to export and so on. And countries are becoming, like India. India is not only a big producer of goods, but is a really huge exporter of service, right? So this is the thing that you can take a look at to see where you are going. Now let's move to my war. I'm a very belligerent person. I think that you are living, through wars all the time. All the logic of the WTO is the logic of trade in goods, agriculture, industrial, the logic of service, and now digital trade. Well, but the question is, the old logic that say, come on, you can protect your country through tariff, and no anti-dumping, that is an over tariff, or anti-subsidies. All these you impose at the border. When the product arrives at the border, you have to, you can protect this if the other country is doing not legal issues, right, practices. But this is a kind of, the liberalization at the border is a kind of 20th century kind of protection instruments. Now what we are talking about? We are talking about the new protection through regulations, and we are going to talk about this. And the only way to do is to understand the essence of the regulation, that is science and technology, and then to negotiate how we are going to negotiate cooperation exercise and so on. So it's exactly what you are discussing in this kind of program here. And again, you have the WHO is not producing many new rules, but the FTAs are, the preferential trade arrangement, the free trade arrangements are really producing a lot of new regulations. My group is studying now, amongst you, the Mercosul European Union. Example, what Brazil negotiates in the GATS, the service agreement in WHO, is like this, very small kind of liberalization, level liberalization. If you go to the Mercosur European Union on service, come on, you can imagine how the regulatory framework, how this change. And now my exercise is what you are going to, what we gave in the WHO, what we are going to give in the Mercosur European Union, and what Brazil is going to give if start negotiating an agreement, any kind of agreement with the United States. And guess, United States and European Union are big rule makers. Brazil is not a rule maker. And the question is how to, which one to follow. In this, the big point, what kind of model you are going to follow. This is the thing that's really, for me, is the most important thing in the trade issues right now. Let us move a little bit on. I have, remember I talk about technical barriers to trade. How you regulate the world, through mandatory regulations, to voluntary standards. It is the certification of, or what we call a conformity assessment procedures. If you study chemistry, engineer, you know what I'm talking about. To build any kind of big construction, you have to go to see what are the standards that you have to follow that are mandatory or not for you to build a building, right? And here you have the part of the technical issues and the part of sanitary and phytosanitary, as I told you, that is about the health, human health, plant health, and animal health, and also the protection of the environment, this kind of protection. And you have the instruments are laws, are ordinance or resolutions that are mandatory in the same, the inspection and control procedures at the border if you want to import this kind of things, right? And if you go to this, if you go to the numbers of the WHO, here you have the total notification on technical measures notified to the WHO. United States and European Union are really notifying a lot of new rules, and the other countries are producing, but not so much, and doing reviews of this. If you go to the SPS, you have here also a lot of production of this kind of measures. And here are the numbers. If you go to the totals, you are talking about 25,000 regulations that are mandatory for you to follow if you want to export. What is behind these regulations? Science, technology. I want to impose this because if not, you are going to kill somebody because your hairdress is going to put fire on the building, or machinery is going to kill the operator. Come on, you have really a lot of technical issues, and you have, these are the amount of notifications of regulations that you have. And look for the numbers of sanitary, phytosanitary. And the question is, are you ready to follow this? If you want to export anything, you have to follow this. This is knowledge. This is the thing that the information technology is really helping us a lot. But if you want to export, you have to follow. Now, I'm talking about a lot that European Union, United States are the rule makers. I was in China 5 times discussing this. And the professor, Chinese professor, said to me, well, professor, look, China is exporting. The big revolution of China is to export. And if I am exporter, I have to follow the rules. But not anymore. In one area, China is now producing the rules. What is this area? The digital area, the information technology. And please, this is a thing, and this is in the origin of the big fight between the United States and China. And this I'm really studying, discussing, there's a lot of work on this already. That is, for the digital area, China is producing their own impacts, own regulations, right? And you have the Huawei, you are following, come on. Brazil has a lot of Chinese investment on power generation, on electricity transmission, in oil and gas, and now in the food area, in the producing units to produce meat and soya beans and so on. Now, the question is, in the area of telecommunication, all the main operators of Brazil, they have already Huawei instruments, big equipments. So when the United States start to Brazil say, you cannot buy Huawei equipment anymore. What Brazil is saying, sorry. So this is the war that we're talking about. And what is the consequence? I was in Paris last month when the United States decided to impose that Google could not export the system to Huawei products, right? To China's products. Again, and China is developing their own system to talk with. And again, it's the new area of trade, and this is important for you. We have goods, agriculture, industrial, you have service, you have intellectual property, but now you have another important area in trade, big data. Now you tell me what the rules for big data trade. All your informations, every time you touch your cellular, it doesn't matter if it is Chinese or Japanese, Korean, doesn't matter. The time you touch your computer or your iPhone, your data are being delivered to the main, or Google or Amazon, it doesn't matter. And then all this data is being transformed in non-identifiable data, and these big data are being sold to all the big interest parties around the world. Can be what? A producer of a medicine. Look, every time that I go to a pharmacy, a drugstore, and buy a thing, they ask me my identity number. What do you think this number is going to be sold to whom? To the pharmaceutical unit, to the health enterprise, to my health insurance, to everybody. So this is the thing that now is becoming the big issue of trade. And if you go to the first slide, about where you are going to produce and negotiate rules for this trade, there is no place. WTO is trying to do this. Is service, is not service? Who is going and what's going on? Again, United States and European Union. United States said, doesn't matter your information, this is going to be important for the world, you accept this. The new generation is accepting this. I'm furious. But because I'm receiving, I touch my iPhone and I start receiving a lot of propaganda. It's fantastic. If you touch, you ask for what is, the only thing I buy by internet is food for my dog. I have 2. The only thing I do is feed for animals, and I buy this. Do you think what's going on? Every time I open my newspaper in the morning, Estadão, Folha, I receive immediately, buy this marvelous kind of medicine for your shampoo for your pet, and I hate this kind of things. I'm being, and then you start, and if you have a Google, do you have a Google attendant? Who has a Google attendant? Alexa. Take care. Take a look if your Alexa is working even without you touching it. And what's going on? The information, do you know what's happened? A newspaper in Belgium, Google sell this kind of information to a firm that has the work to put all the information in the right place. And then one of these guys from Google decided to give this information to a Belgian newspaper. And the Belgian newspaper recognized something in Belgium and discovered the owner of the information, because it was a conversation between this guy and his wife. Look, with names and so on. And then they are suing Google. But look, your information is being used as trade. If I ask this to my nephews and all this, the young people said, marvelous, Vera, this is a kind of thing that I want to buy things. I'd be delighted to receive information to travel all around. But okay, look what this is, the big war around the world now. United States has the US has the big firms on digital economy. Europe. Don't ask me why there is no European Amazon and Netflix and Google and so on. Don't ask me. But what the European Union is doing is imposing on the WTO the issue of security. I mean, on data protection of data, your personal data protection. And now what the France is trying to do is to get some money from this kind of trade, because the European Union said, no, you cannot tax this. No taxation on this kind of commerce, of trade. But the European Union said, no, I'm going to tax 3%, 4%. And this is the big fight now between the United States and European Union. How we are going to treat. Look, all this can be considered trade all around the world, right? So I talk about the big players already. Let's move. And who is negotiating this kind of coherence and convergence so the world can continue trade is OECD. And this is a marvelous area for you to work with. That is how your diplomacy, right? How the OECD is discussing the regulation, how you are going to make your policy regulatory issues, right? These are the big concepts: cooperation, coherence. Before you start going, it's a big area for you to work with. How you do this kind of scientific and innovation diplomacy. You have to say, first question, inside the country, you are coherent? not in Brazil. You have agencies that are fighting each other. Come on, this is my space, get out. This is the thing that I'm going to regulate, right? So you have to be coherent. You have to be, in the European Union, you have already a supervision board. In the United States, you have the famous OIRA, that's the Office of Impact Assessment. You cannot do a new regulation if you do not examine what's the impact of this. There's a big fight. And China, I'm following this, really interesting. China, and the big question is, China is going to follow the European Union model or the United States model. So this is the thing that I want to see what's going to happen. So coherence inside the country, and then convergence. This is the area where you can work. That is how I'm going to negotiate this kind of regulations. And to be a negotiator in this area, you must be a scientist, or you have to know really a lot about what's going on. Can you discuss sanitary and phytosanitary without studying biology and so on? This is where your diplomacy is going to work, right? Because normally convergence and cooperations is among countries, right? You have to discuss this among countries and to see how you're going to negotiate. And the instruments are harmonization, equivalence, and mutual recognition. So you can export a television or a computer if the other countries accept your certification, your standardization issues, right? So really is the point that is under your work. And here you have what the OECD is proposing on this. Sorry, I'm talking about in Portuguese. It's OECD, right? You understand. It's the Paris Organization for European Cooperation, right? Economic cooperation. Sorry. Now, let's go to the big problem. And now I'm going to enter the area of war, regulatory war. If you go to the area of technical barriers, you have big international organizations, but they are the ISO organization, the standard organization. The members are the private sectors that are the members. The International Electrotechnical Commission and the Telecommunication Union. You have the big three international organizations for this area. For the area of SPS, you have the Codex Alimentarius government, the Organization of Health, Animal Health, also government people. There is private people over there. And the International Plant Protection Convention. Come on, this is pure science, pure science. I was there sometimes in the meetings. I said, well, what they are talking about is exactly how you make the tests, how you make the production of the genes, and so you change. This is where the area where these people met. And the question is, who are the countries behind, what are the countries behind these organizations, right? You have organizations that are multilateral, ISO, IC, ITU organization. Then you have standards produced by regional organizations, and other European Union model is behind the SENS and ELEC ETSI regional organization. They produce the standards to be followed. But if you go, look, you have in the European Union, you have the multilateral. In the European Union is a kind of top down, from the top downwards, discussing through the directives of the European Union. And this is a fantastic work that we are doing to see how you regulate only the big functions of a product. What this product must do is to produce some kind of information from one point to the other. So the directives is only for the general big issues. But if you go to the United States, the system, the model is completely different. It's market-oriented from the bottom to the top. And you have 300 producers of standards. What do you think these two words, how they are going to behave? They crash. And Brazil is exactly facing this challenge. Brazil signed, negotiated an agreement with the European Union. Immediately, a week after this negotiation, the end of the negotiation, we had the visit of Mr. Secretary of Commerce from the United States. And what Ms. Wilbur Ross said when he arrived in Brazil, come on, Brazil, Mercosur, you just signed, you just finished a negotiation with the European Union, but you are not paying attention because you are swallowing poison pills with the agreement. And immediately said, wow, fantastic. The United States is recognizing that my analysis is right. The two models are fighting each other. This is a war. The European Union is going. Normally, this is a normal plate, imposing in Brazil standards, automobiles and all this area, and also standards on the area of phytosanitary. Do you want to export your soybean? You have to follow these rules. And the US is not following the same rules, the same orientation. The scientific basis behind this information are not the same. And you understand what I'm talking about now? You have two words. China is a different word, is a word of information technology, but for the other areas, for the other countries, China follows, like Brazil, follows the rules. I want to export to the United States, I have to follow the standards to export to the United States. Now, if you go to this era of big regional arrangement, big preferential arrangements or free trade arrangements, what's going to happen? You have to follow the rules of the other part of the agreement. And you are not talking about elimination tariff anymore. You are, look, what the US, the European Union is doing with us, with Brazil, is behind the goods, behind the products of agriculture. European Union is selling us standards, regulations, intellectual property, innovation, technology. All these things are being included in the agreement. And if you go to the other side, and this is the thing amongst you that is putting me really furious, is that, okay, I'll talk about my research in a minute, right? So you have two kinds of models of to produce this kind of rules, and let's go, and this you have a lot of information on this, how the European Union's function, you have the, and the other funny thing is that the US has more than 10,000 standards produced by these 300 standardizing bodies, but the United States is saying that, look, 12 of my standards are international, like ISO standards are. The question is, can Brazil sit down in the negotiations of ISO? Yes, Brazil is there, India is there, everybody, South Africa. Can Brazil, South Africa, and China, and so on, sit down in the discussion on the United States? No. So this is the difference. What China is doing, I have no idea. If China is going to allow, well, we have a problem from the language, but China is going to allow other countries to sit down and to discuss the standards, to produce goods and agriculture and so on. So this is the big fight. So US, if you talk about diplomacy, do you know that the United States has a standard official in Brazil? Do you know that amongst you? The United States has a very nice lady from the State Department, not negotiation, talking about standardization in Brazil. Guess what she's doing? It's a very nice lady, I know her. Come on, it's trade. Do you want to produce chips? How about if you use American models? It's the standard of the United States. Come on, normal business, what's the problem? The European Union is doing the same. So When you go to talk with people from, come on, experts from Germany, what do you think the Germans are? Oh, the Germans are selling machinery. Oh, nice. No, the Germans are selling a machinery, but behind the machinery, a lot of technology, patents, and a lot of science behind automation and so on. So every good, every seed of plant, they have a lot of science and technology embedded. And this is the thing that's becoming tradable now. Now, here you have the famous, but again, what we developing country can do, if you cannot sit down in this organization that are setting standards, how we can influence this? No way, you have to follow this only, right? And look, through the preferential arrangements, they are imposing already some kind of standards to you. Did you know that under the agreement of Mercosur and European Union, there is a big annex, the first annex, is about the standards that Brazil must follow to automobiles. If you want to export parts or pieces of automobiles, you have to follow the standards of the European Union. And we are going to negotiate an agreement with the United States. Guess what's going to happen? If you want to export anything to the United States, you have to follow their standards. So this is the big discussion for you. That is, developing countries, what kind of standards, when you start producing, following your standards, you cannot change, impossible. It's a production line, you cannot do these things. So before you choose the standard, you have to decide if you want to export to, not to Europe and United States, but to other countries that are following the US or the United States or the China standards somewhere in the future, before you start producing anything. Look, this is the big the regulatory war that you have to follow to know what you're going to do, right? And this is happening already. And now, I told you before that multilateral organizations, more or less you know what's going on. Now about sustainability. The concept of sustainability is much more complex. I'm going to finish in 5 minutes, then we have a lot of time to discuss. It's about environment, labor standards, and animal welfare. Amongst you, the European Union tried to negotiate, impose environment since the beginning of the Doha round. Labor, many times during the conference. Animal welfare before the Uruguay, the Doha round. So the European Union is trying to do this. Come on, use these standards, but please, before exporting anything, you have to follow labor standards and so on. Animal, you cannot kill the animal with suffering and so on. Because the European Union could not introduce this in the WTO, the European Union is introducing this in their preferential arrangements, in Mercosur arrangement. So you have to follow this if you want to export. If we finish an agreement in the United States, you are going to change completely our intellectual property policy in Brazil, completely, right? And now to finish, and I love the discussion. They are not using government organization to produce these VSS standards. They are using non-governmental institutions, organizations. They privatize this kind of, and how they privatize this? They ask for the NGOs to produce this kind of labels, these standards, through a label. And then you have global, do you know about Global Gap, ICC, and all the trade fair, all these voluntary standards. They are not voluntary, come on. If you don't have the label, you are not going to export, full stop. You have to follow. And they are, how you are going to certify this? You have to follow their instructions also. There is I have no problem with the labels as such. My problem is that the labels are duplicizing each other. If you follow one label, you have to put a lot of transform your farm in a way, and if you use another label, you have to make completely different kind of reforms. So my problem is who is going to make the supervision of these labels? There is a kind of ISO organization for this? No. I was in London discussing with one of the possible organizations of the label, the label of the labels, right? But they are not really having the power to make this kind of supervision. The WHO, I have no idea. And so this, for me, is a big issue. That is, how you are going to negotiate this kind of rules, right? I'm finishing. And the main question is, this is for you, haha. What is the different approach between the United States and European Union on these standards? In the United States, if you go to the concept, the basic concept, is what the US said is a science-based approach. More or less, you have to kill 3 persons or 3 animals. Okay, this medicine is not good, so you can stop imports of that thing. Why I'm talking about this? You know, when you go to the science and go to statistics, I was a professor of statistics. You know what is, you have the curve, and then you can know it's a false positive, yes, it's not true result. So this is science. You cannot have all the same results all the time. So you have more or less the space to get your decisions. But if you go to European Union, the model is completely different. It's based on precaution. What is the precautionary principle? It's not based necessarily it is based on science, but you take the decision to impede imports because you suppose this can cause some harm. What's happened with the hormones panel in the WHO? Come on, billions and billions of dollars behind a big fight. The European Union decided not to import meat from the US. The reason? Hormones. Who's going to, and then a big fight of science behind hormones, the hormone that you give to your cattle. That 3 months, after 3 months, there's no residue of this. But the result is a very nice. The animal became with more weight, with more milk. So the impact on the science on this production resource. What is the consequence of this? The European Union has, at that time, a huge stock of meat already, and use a very good argument that, come on, you treat your cattle with hormones, and this hormone can cause harm. It's not safe enough. And then we have 10 years of scientific discussion in the WHO. You can imagine the huge room of WHO, completely full of people, and the scientists discussing in each side, producing all the evidence that hormones cause harm. No, hormones do not cause harm. So, come on. At the end, no conclusion, the issue was solved, because we have retaliation, the European Union and the United States fight with, start imposing other restriction, other products. And so the consequence, okay, you are going to write in your label that this meat was prepared with hormones, and the consumer is going to decide which kind of meat to buy. So look, the issue of precaution. It starts in 1992 with the Convention of Climate, right? And then, okay, I accept precaution for climate change. I study physics, right? I have no idea if what's causing the temperature going up, it is the sun that is, sending us. What's going on? I think it's too much, but I agree that pollution is an awful thing, cause you harm, so take care with pollution. But again, I accept that for precaution, we start establish some kind of rules for, again, using trade to impose a decision. So if you export meat from Brazil, Brazil starts exporting meat, if you are not taking care of our Amazon forest, I accept this. You have the winds that come, the water of the Amazon evaporation, then you have, and São Paulo is going to be touched if this cycle of the winds and rain start changing. So this is the thing that you have to, so the Amazon forest is a big issue, right? It's not only a globalist, so that is a revolution, no, it's a revolt of the imposition of the left, and so this thing that's been discussed in Brazil. Now, here you have, for me, the best example where science and technology is really the basis of the discussion. So be ready is not a scientific diplomacy of science, not only to go to travel a lot and go to stay and organize big meetings. It's more than this. It's also you are talking about the future of the Earth, and you talk about one way to impose decision is to trade, and so you have to discuss a little bit about trade, right? I think with this I can finish. Here is the other ones. Look, I'm look for order all the time. How can you export agriculture if you have all these labels around? 80% of labels produced by European Union, and 80% of the labels related to agriculture. So, Brazil, pay attention. So, and my point is, okay, I'm going to follow, but please, if there is discrimination between the labels, to whom I'm going to complain? That's my point, right? And I'm really studying all these labels, what is behind. The funny thing, the main office of all these are either in Bonn, or in Germany, or in London. So yes, the European Union gives a lot of money to all these people. I am a green person, but I want international rules for this. These are the numbers. They are really growing up. These are the numbers of VSS per year. And the definition of it, if it is public or private, is mandatory, non mandatory. Come on, if you cannot, if the Walmart, if Metro, if Tesco, the big chains in Europe, impose a label, you have to use this, right? So who is behind this? So you have by origin, as I told you, and the results, the multiplication of standards, the fragmentation of rules, increasing costs to producers and exporters, and new generation of barriers to trade. Now, I think it's over. You have more things, right? And the conclusion is more or less what I advanced already. There is no agreement. In the TBT and SPS, you have W agreements, not for VSS. Who's going to supervise them? Who's going to coordinate the action in WTO and in the Mercosur European Union, as an example? If the United States, if you get to negotiate an agreement. So with this, I think I finish. And 1 minute to conclude. I think I live in my life, and I use all my knowledge as a student of physics and mathematics all my time, and through these years of following the negotiations, and I was in Geneva following all the negotiation of China, accession to the WTO, and there's a big discussion what kind of TBT, SPS China must follow. So that's this life behind a negotiation organization like the WTO. If you go to the other big house for you to follow is the WIPE organization, also in Geneva. But I think that you are going to have somebody that's going to speak. As I said, for the countries that are not following the rules of the TRIPS agreement, that is trade-related intellectual property rights, you can be sued in a panel, and you can be retaliated. And there's a lot of panels already about intellectual property rights. But I think that's another area that you can work a lot. Again, is a different concept. The science and technology that you use in trade, and you have the basis of it. And for me, the big proof that you have basis on science, TBT and SPS agreement. But if you go to the intellectual property right organization, you are going to see a different logic, how you protect your intellectual property. But again, behind every patent, you have science, you have technology, you have, again, countries negotiating and countries discussing, scientists discussing among each other. So please you have a lot of work to do. Now you know where to get your information. And remember my first slide. I think this is the most important message that I can give to you. And with this I finish. Oops, that's it. Your life cannot be just in one place. Your information must be searched in other different sources. And for you, this is the thing that's going to separate a normal negotiator from another one. Come on, you start negotiations, said, okay, you start with trade, but look, you have finance, you have sustainability investment behind, what kind of things are going, you have standards, what standards are following. So you have to put all your information, all your knowledge on the table to negotiate. To really, and come on, you are going to talk about science all the time. If you have no idea what's going on behind the information technology world, you cannot be a good negotiator. It doesn't matter. You have to understand what's going on. Who produces big data, who's taking care of this, and so on. Right? Good chance. And for the big research that I'm finished, this will be in English. And Amancio, this is fantastic. That is what we discover, that Mercosul, let me go to the map. I have a map here, right? Look. Oh, I need a big map to show you. This is look, what I decide to study. What are the standards that Brazil is following? And more or less you have American and European standards, automobiles, and we study by sector by sector, machinery, electrical equipments, pharmaceutics, cosmetics. We study all this. And discover that in some sense, Brazil is balanced, following the two kinds of standards. And then we went to study Argentina. Argentina, but to the same sectors, are following European standards, much more than Brazil. How can you talk about Mercosul if the standards you are following are different? Tell me, why there is no agreement between the United States and the European Union? The transatlantic agreement. It's impossible because they have, the two countries, they have the two parts, they have different basis for scientific basics for understanding each other, for imposing their standards. So the trade agreement, you can talk about tariff, but you have to talk about equivalence, mutual recognition. And this is a thing that automobile United States is not going to accept Europeans and so on. And so what we discuss, and we start what we concluded our research is about Chile, Colombia, and Mexico. And guess, they are following the American standards. So forget about to use the standards of Brazil to export products for South American countries. So standards are dividing the countries in different regions. And for informatics, I have no idea what's going to happen. It will depend of how this big fight between China and the United States is going to be solved, right? So again, you are using scientific products, the products of science, to impose new rules. So come on, you have a big fight, a big field to study. That's diplomacy on this area of science and technology, right? Ufa, end.